The Voodoo Market. The Voodoo religion originated and spread most widely in the West African republics. According to historians, Voodoo came from the most ancient religion on earth, which appeared along with the rise of African civilization. In the city of Lomé, the capital of the African Republic of Togo, lies the so-called Akodesawa Market, the main magical market. In the open air are countless rows with terrifying goods, bones, herbs, potions, severed heads and limbs of wild animals, and much more. Sorcerers from all over Africa come here in search of ingredients for their rituals, but in addition to witches and shamans, hundreds of ordinary people wander through the market, looking for solutions to their everyday problems. Some want to be cured of illness, others strive to become stronger and more resilient, while others wish to cast a curse on their enemies. Often the ritual begins right on the spot. The seller makes 3 deep cuts on his chest or back, while the supplicant rubs into himself a healing powder of the most dubious nature, and after smoking a certain type of mixture, the person falls into a trip, he loses control of himself, and begins to see hallucinations. The impressions from these substances are so realistic, but the consequences of such acts can be the most disastrous for a person. The Capuchin Catacombs. In the Sicilian city of Palermo, beneath the Church of St. Mary, lie the Capuchin Catacombs. The entire interior of the catacombs consists solely of mummified and embalmed bodies. For a long time, the catacombs were considered the most elite cemetery, where the most honorable and famous people were buried. The tradition of burying people in the catacombs began back in the 16th century. The first Capuchin monk was interred there in 1599. The unique composition of the soil and the atmosphere in the catacombs slowed organic processes and delayed the decomposition of bodies. Before burial, the dead were dried in special chambers for 8 months, after which they were either hung up or laid along the walls or in special niches. Not only monks were buried in the catacombs, but also the most generous benefactors of the monastery. At that time, for any layperson, it was a great honor to be interred in the crypt of St. Mary. Over time, the crypt became overcrowded, and the Capuchins began digging long corridors to accommodate new burials. In 1837, a ban was introduced on open burials, but relatives of the deceased often bypassed this restriction by leaving small windows in coffins that allowed the body to be seen. The final ban on such burials was imposed only in 1882. Byberry Psychiatric Hospital. In Philadelphia, originally built as a small farm, it soon turned into a refuge for hopeless patients expelled from other hospitals. These people no longer had any chance of ever leaving Byberry. Since the middle of the 20th century, there were more than enough incurable mentally ill patients, and the hospital began to experience unprecedented demand. But with such a large number of often extremely aggressive people who had committed the most serious crimes, the hospital had no chance to cope using civilized methods. Workers reported that patients, most of whom were completely naked, clung desperately to each other out of fear and cold, and defecated right on the floor, something that did not in the least affect the feelings of the specially selected, heartless staff. Some patients claimed that they were chained to their beds for many months in a row. Others spoke of inhuman torture inflicted on the most violent. It went so far that one person was dismembered and hidden on the hospital grounds, and the killer was never found. Despite reports of the staff's horrific behavior and terrifyingly unsanitary conditions, government authorities did nothing about it. Only in the late 1990s was a thorough investigation conducted, and after the shocking report of the investigators, a decision was made to close the place. For many years, the building of Byberry Psychiatric Hospital remained abandoned, becoming a mecca for Satanists who carried out their ritual ceremonies there. Poveglia. In Venice in the 15th century, when the plague was rapidly spreading across Europe, cities were overflowing with corpses that could not be buried in time, and the decomposing bodies spread infections and diseases. The Italian authorities decided to use Poveglia Island as a quarantine zone for the burial of bodies. Not only corpses, but also living people, including women and children infected with the plague, were brought to the island. They were thrown into pits with corpses or burned alive in order to stop the spread of the plague. More than 200,000 people were killed on this island, and according to rumors, the soil still consists of human ash. The island remained abandoned until 1922, when a psychiatric hospital for the mentally ill was opened there. The chief doctor was given full carte blanche to conduct cruel experiments on patients, practicing new methods of treatment that resembled torture more than medicine. At night, patients heard whispers, moans, footsteps, and saw shadows wandering through the corridors. Even the staff soon began to encounter the same things, and many employees left the hospital. 2 years later, the chief doctor was found dead. He had fallen to his death from the bell tower. Some said he went insane and threw himself down. Others claimed he was pushed by his own patients. Today, Poveglia is officially closed. Entry to it is strictly forbidden. Locals avoid the island and try not to mention it, otherwise one might get into trouble with the law.